Curaçao's 2026 FIFA World Cup journey, the island that changed football history. Not every World Cup story is written by the teams that lift the trophy. Some are remembered because they redefine what is possible, inspiring generations long after the final whistle. Curaçao's journey to the 2026 FIFA World Cup was one of those stories. It was not simply the tale of a football team qualifying for the world's greatest tournament, it was the story of a tiny Caribbean island proving that dreams have no borders. In a competition dominated by nations with millions of people and decades of footballing tradition, Curaçao stood proudly among them, not because history favored them, but because belief carried them there. For decades, the FIFA World Cup existed only as a distant dream for Curaçao. The island had produced talented footballers who excelled across Europe, yet the national team had never crossed the final hurdle. Every qualifying campaign ended with disappointment, every generation wondering whether football's biggest stage would forever remain out of reach. But the generation led by Captain Cuco Martina, inspired by the experience of Eloy Room, Leandro Bacuna, Juninho Bacuna, Jurgen Locadia, Rangelo Janga, Kenji Gore, and Brandley Kouas, refused to let history define their future. They believed that the impossible was only a challenge waiting to be conquered. The defining moment arrived in November 2025. Facing Jamaica in one of the most important matches the nation had ever played, Curaçao earned a hard-fought 0-0 draw, a result that confirmed them as group winners and secured qualification for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. As the final whistle echoed across the stadium, decades of waiting came to an end. Celebration erupted across Willemstad and every corner of the island. Blue flags filled the streets, car horns echoed through the night, fireworks illuminated the Caribbean sky, and tears flowed freely. For the first time in history, Curaçao had qualified for football's greatest stage. That qualification carried extraordinary significance. Curaçao became the smallest nation in FIFA World Cup history, both by population and land area, ever to qualify for the tournament. An island of barely 150,000 people had achieved what countless larger footballing nations had failed to accomplish. They also became the first non-sovereign national team from the Americas ever to reach a FIFA World Cup, joining a unique historical list that includes England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, the Netherlands, and the Dutch East Indies. It was a milestone that extended far beyond football, placing Curaçao among the most remarkable underdog stories the sport has ever witnessed. Yet even before the tournament began, adversity struck once again. On February 23, 2026, legendary Dutch manager Dick Advocaat stepped down from his position due to concerns surrounding his daughter's health. His departure left uncertainty hanging over the squad just months before their historic debut. Former Netherlands midfielder Fred Rutten was appointed as head coach, but disagreements between players and the new coaching staff quickly emerged. Questions surrounded the team's preparation, and many feared that the fairy tale might end before the tournament even began. Football, however, has always loved dramatic twists. As his daughter's condition improved, Dick Advocaat returned to the national team on May 11, 2026, following strong support from the players themselves and growing pressure from Curaçao's main sponsor, Corendon. His return restored belief inside the dressing room and reunited the squad before the biggest tournament in the nation's history. In doing so, Advocaat also became the oldest manager ever to coach at a FIFA World Cup, adding another historic chapter to Curaçao's remarkable journey. The World Cup draw showed little mercy. Curaçao's very first match came against Germany, four-time world champions and one of football's greatest powers. It was the ultimate baptism of fire. Germany's quality eventually prevailed in a 7-1 victory, but even on that difficult afternoon, Curaçao created a moment that will live forever. Midfielder Livano Caminentia scored the nation's first-ever FIFA World Cup goal, forever engraving his name into Curaçaoan football history. The scoreboard belonged to Germany, but the moment belonged to Curaçao. Across the island, celebrations erupted because a dream generations had waited for had finally become reality. If the opening match introduced Curaçao to the world, the second match earned the world's respect. Facing Ecuador, the Blue Wave produced one of the tournament's most courageous defensive displays. Time and again Ecuador surged forward, only to be denied by the extraordinary brilliance of goalkeeper Eloy Room. The veteran produced 15 breathtaking saves, falling just one save short of Tim Howard's all-time FIFA World Cup record. It was a goalkeeping masterclass that left commentators and supporters around the world in awe. When the referee blew the final whistle, the scoreboard read 0-0. Curaçao had earned its first ever FIFA World Cup point, becoming the smallest nation ever to avoid defeat in a World Cup match. For his unforgettable performance, Eloy Room became the first Curaçaoan footballer ever to win the FIFA World Cup Man of the Match award, producing one of the defining individual performances of the entire tournament. Throughout the campaign, Cuco Martina led with calm authority, while Leandro Bacuna and Juninho Bacuna battled relentlessly in midfield, refusing to surrender possession against superior opponents. Jurgen Locadia constantly stretched opposing defenses with intelligent movement, Rangelo Janga fought tirelessly as the focal point in attack, Kenji Gore brought pace and creativity down the flanks, and Brandley Kuwas added moments of flair that reminded the world of the technical quality this small island possessed. Together, they represented far more than 11 footballers, they represented every Curaçaoan who had ever dared to dream. Although the Blue Wave would eventually leave the tournament in the group stage, the results alone could never define their legacy. Their greatest achievement was not measured by victories but by the hope they inspired. Every child who watched Curaçao compete now knows that wearing the blue jersey on football's biggest stage is possible. Every supporter who filled the streets of Willemstad, every family that gathered around television screens, and every member of the Curaçaoan diaspora scattered across the world became part of a story that transcended football itself. Years from now, many will forget the scorelines. They may forget who topped the group or who lifted the trophy. But they will remember the tiny Caribbean island that refused to accept its limitations. They will remember the team that became the smallest nation ever to qualify for a FIFA World Cup, scored its first World Cup goal through Livano Kamenencha, earned its first World Cup point, witnessed Eloy Room produce one of the greatest goalkeeping performances in World Cup history, and proved that courage can stand shoulder to shoulder with greatness. The 2026 FIFA World Cup did not simply introduce Curaçao to the world. It immortalized the Blue Wave. It proved that football's greatest stories are not always written by champions, they are often written by those brave enough to believe that even the smallest island can leave the biggest legacy.